Hey everybody, welcome to Mental Health Matters, a podcast by St. Louis Counseling. Check out our services at stlouiscounseling.org. And remember, you got to spell out Saint. So, the podcast that talks about the breakdown of stigma that brings everyday conversations to the table and to help us all realize we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health, and it's just normal. It's completely normal. So we always bring in amazing guests, and today is no exception. We have Dr. Terry Harris, who is the Executive Director of Student Services at Rockwood School District. And we also have Aashish Allu, who is a student within the Rockwood School District. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited that you both agreed to come on board with us. And man, there's so many things we can talk about today, so hopefully we'll try to narrow it down a little bit. But first, Terry, tell us a little bit about your journey at Rockwood, because you started out like a teacher, right?
Yeah, so I started off as a resource teacher at Marquette High School, then helped write my major was African American Studies, so I really thought I was going to be a professor, right? And then Dr. Art McCoy called me and said, "Hey, I need you to do a presentation in the classroom." I did this presentation and I fell in love with these students. And so eventually wrote the African American history curriculum, taught that for a couple of years, then did some diversity work, led the Department of Educational Equity and Diversity. And then for the last 7 years, I've been over student services, which I love. Student services is everything focused on students' mental health and well-being, right? So in school systems, you have the curriculum side, you have the HR side, you have the finance side, and then everything else is student services. Like that is the heart and bread of the school. So I get to do that. I love it.
So yeah, you get duties as assigned means everything else.
Everything else. Right? If
else.
it doesn't fall in curriculum, HR, or finance, hey Terry, we have a project for you. So yeah.
So then the student side. So Aashish, you are going into your senior year, right?
Yep.
So tell us about now. Have you been in Rockwood your whole school existence?
So I came to Rockwood in kindergarten, so I've been in the Rockwood School District from K through 12.
So you know it well at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite well.
And so then, why? What interest? Or what came about from the mental health perspective that you wanted to get involved and you took those steps?
Yeah, so I mean, what I was seeing throughout my high school was like no surprise, like everyone in the community was like seeing what was happening. There was an increasing number of suicides that were going on within our district and community. And that's kind of when I kind of took a step back and was like, okay, I feel like something needs to be done because we just keep losing more classmates and students, and there has to be something that we can do. So that's kind of when I decided to speak out and try to engender some change. And that's kind of when I realized that mental health was a very hot topic because of the different way that people saw on such a sensitive topic. And it highlighted the stigma because some people still weren't comfortable talking about it, or some people were more comfortable talking about it, but just didn't know how to get other people to have those conversations. So it was a little bit of a hard journey between administrators and students for a little bit, but I mean now it's a really great relationship that we have. We've been working together to try and get as many resources as possible to the students, and just try and make students more aware that going through school is stressful. It's okay, but everyone's there to help you out.
So Terry, from that perspective, which is amazing insight, right? And then also action and following through. So much applause. This budding advocate of mental health. I love it already. So Terry, from your perspective then, when he talks about, the school was experiencing this, the district was experiencing this, and how hard was that to start helping break through that stigma with mental health?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. And, so as a history major, what I, share with these students is that there's nothing in American history that took place without young people at the forefront. Everything. The American Revolution, the Civil Rights, era, like all these things, young people at the forefront. So to see these young people step up, I wasn't surprised. We have to start to listen to students. But there are some other pieces, right? There are some pieces where, there is this shame that you have as a parent. There's a shame that you have as family members, right? Like, I did everything to make sure that my child was okay, and yet, he or she suffered from this mental illness, and we received the help. We went to the counselors, we did all these things, and yet my child succumbed to this violent act or this act. That's really hard for some parents. And so then what you have, parents may say to the school, I don't want anyone to know about this. So the parents who are stepping out and saying, hey, this happened to my son, Chad's Coalition, this happened to my son, and I don't want this to happen to anyone else. For these young people to say, hey, I was depressed. I did struggle when I was taking 4 or 5 AP classes. I wasn't well. I didn't eat. Like, that is an act of courage as well. And so I think what we have to do is we have to normalize little things before we get to these big things. Little things in terms of, like, my anxiety is real. Like, I get anxiety when such and such. I feel depressed when these things happen. So then we can start talking about those things. We have to start normalizing the fact that mental wellness is equivalent to physical wellness. If you don't take care of it, then you're going to see some gaps. But we can catch this. And I think that's what these young people did. Like, they were brave enough to tell their own stories. And, Aashish, what he's not saying is that he organized a group of students. So it wasn't just Aashish. And in fact, they organized students from every aspect of our district. All 4 high schools, they reached out on their own. They talked to these kids, and they started to tell the story. If you can, Aashish, would you just, Aashish, would you tell the story about the survey that you guys created?
Yeah, so we actually created a story. So Dr. Harris was nice enough to be able to get us a spot at the Rockwood board meeting in February. So before that, we started to do some research around the district, try and get some statistics from students around. And what we did was we conducted a survey that asked a few basic questions to students, and it was answer on your own will. If you don't want to answer the survey, that's completely fine. But if you're comfortable with answering, go ahead and answer it. And what we saw were alarming rates of students that were opening up and saying that they felt as if they were struggling. And like right now, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was an alarming rate of students. But the issue that we ran into when we saw that was when the survey is anonymous, which that one was, students were comfortable with saying it, but then obviously once it isn't anonymous, they aren't ready to step out and say it. So that's kind of where we were talking with administrators and counselors and trying to figure out how is it that we can bridge that gap and try and figure out a way for students to be comfortable now to talk to administrators, parents, counselors in that way and open up about their issues. And kind of like what he was mentioning earlier about students being at the forefront and whatnot. One thing that we kind of have seen progress is at the beginning, for sure, I'll be the first one to admit that a lot of us students, we had the passion, the motivation, but we were a little bit naive when it came to some things. Like at the beginning we started and we thought a lot of the problem was with the district, and we went back and forth on this multiple times originally. But what we figured out as we talked more with administrators and gained more insight into the district level and what they were doing to deal with mental health issues in our community, and then the students providing their insight, we realized this was a lot more of a community effort, and we needed to start with just one way of changing action instead of trying to start with these multiple different things. So one thing that we've started doing is trying to work on setting up some way where students can train other students, because the support and the insight that we received from other students around the district, high school students, was that they felt more comfortable when they were talking to other students. And obviously when you're with your own peer group, you're going to be comfortable that way. So we've been setting up some sort of training where it's more of a conversational aspect, where students who are trained will go in and just set up this sort of conversation with a larger group of students and just try and get them more aware with the issues that are going on, normalization, once again, of that anxiety because of the difficulty of high school, whether it's sports, extracurriculars, and then academics. So those are kind of just the avenues that we've been taking.
Let me ask you this question. How much courage does it take for you to keep this rolling?
I would say at the beginning, back in December when I got it going, I just kind of posted a video. I called it a day after that, and then I got back into originally it took a little bit of courage, but then once I saw that there was a widespread support for an issue and that people were more warming up to the idea of talking about it, whether or not they were ready to start the conversation, they were at least ready to join in once it was started. That was really motivating for me. So knowing that there are other people who would like to help but just don't know how, that just keeps me going, trying to find new ways where we can get more people involved to help break the stigma surrounding mental health.
And then Terry, what do you see as like, not the end game, so to speak, but like the vision on where this could go? Like what's in your head?
Yeah, definitely. So I took over student services 7 years ago, and I remember sitting in front of the superintendent at the time and going through his interview, and I shared this African saying, and I'm going to translate, but it basically, for the Masai warriors, they ask, their greeting is, "How are the children?" And then the response is, "All the children are well." So when these Masai warriors walk past each other, they say, "Hey, Tom, how are the children?" And then Tom would say, "Hey, Terry, all the children are well." So the end game is to be able to say, "And all the children are well." Like, so we have to continue to ask, "And how are the children?" And that answer may be, "How are the children?" and we're dealing with mental health. The answer may be, how are the children and we're dealing with economic strife. It may be, how are the children and we're dealing with race. Whatever that thing is after that, we have to be able to say, "And all the children are well." And until we get to that point, we're going to always advocate and fight and stand up for our kids. Like, I mean, honestly, that, and people know I really believe that. Like, that is my moral compass. If we cannot answer at the end of the day that all the children are well, then we have work to do. And right now in our district, and I want to also say that in the Rockwood School District, we have tons of resources. Right. We have amazing resources. I would venture to say we probably have more resources, especially as it relates to student services, than most school districts around. The issue and the problem that we're having, I think, in Rockwood, as well as in other spaces, is that we're not bringing smart students to the table. We're not bringing young people to the table and say, how do you think your peers will access these resources, right? So when you have a social worker, when you have a counselor, and they are in some room, most kids don't want to be pulled out of the room, walk down the hall, and everyone knows that that's the counselor and that's the social worker. Exactly. So then you become asking these questions. Oh, is he on drugs? Oh, is he struggling with this? Oh, right? So that kind of exacerbates that stigma. And so as we are asking, "And how are the children?" we have to make sure that children are at the table to help us find that answer.
So that inclusion.
To include the children, we have to include the children.
So that's like something when we were originally starting at our discussions about mental health and how we could move forward in a district approach of working with students and administrators. I remember we were talking about the resources that were available in the district, and I was able to name like some off, and like I'm a pretty involved member of our district, so I wasn't able to name that many resources, and that's like a point of concern that I saw, was that if I wasn't able to name many of these resources for people who aren't as involved but might need that help in the moment, they might not know where to go. So there are a lot of amazing resources in Rockwood and probably a lot of school districts around the country, but the issue that we're seeing is the accessibility or the lack of access by the students. So it needs to work together on both ends. It's not only the students, it's not only the administrators, but the administrators can market it more towards students, and the students also need to take more action and try and make those resources more popular and make them less stigmatized to use them.
We're at St. Louis Counseling, we have a lot of therapists in a lot of different schools across the region. And one of the things, and there's not a ton of research out there, but we firmly believe, and we hear it from teachers and schools that we're in as well too, but we firmly believe when you have those supports in place, like mental health resources, clinical therapists on your campus or in your building, that there's academic success, there's connection points with that. And it only, because at times, sometimes, we hear like, well, the kids are going to school to learn. They're supposed to, reading, writing, arithmetic, all that other stuff is not needed, right? Just help my kid learn. But then this emotional side of kids, the mental health side, I mean, that's how I believe. I believe if you have those there, that's the better chance for academic success. Is that what you guys experience as
Yeah,
well?
definitely. I think, so there is some research out there, especially when you take a look at the private sector and you start to look at the workforce. And so I don't use this term because I don't like it, but you can go and look at Forbes magazine and some of these other places where they talk about the soft skills, right? The soft skills that are needed to be successful in the workforce. Now, when you take a look at what they're calling soft skills, all of those things is what we call in education social and emotional learning, right? I don't call them soft skills because there's nothing soft about those skills. If you don't have healthy coping mechanisms, you're going to find yourself in trouble. You will be without a job. And so the industry knows that. The industry also knows that in a sense that in Rockwood School District for educators, we have something that's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program. So we understand that. Like, we understand that mental health is really important for adults. We just need to transfer that to the kids. I also want to say this, because I think that this is really important. Part of what needs to happen in all school districts is that we have to suspend our ego. Right? So sometimes we think like, I am Dr. Terry Harris. I am the adult. I know more than these kids, and this is what sometimes you have to suspend your ego and allow yourself to be humbled by an 8-year-old, right? To be humbled by a 13-year-old or a 17-year-old, and to understand that you being humble is because you really want to ensure that all the students are well. So if a 16, 17, 18-year-old is going to teach me, and I learned this information so that I can then help out the 22,000 kids that we have in the Rockwood School District, then thank you, 17-year-old. Right? We have to suspend that level of egoic mind, right? But yeah, I mean, there's nothing soft about these skills. They should be priority. They're important. I remember telling Aashish about a book, Happier, and just a quick synopsis. This book became a book because it was the most popular class at Harvard. Wow. It's like Psychology 578 or something like that. But what the author said is that he had a bunch of kids who were brilliant kids, but they were missing little things. They didn't know how to do little things, and they would struggle because they were looking to be happy. And everyone talks about, I want to be happy, and as if happy is a destination. And so what he argues is that we should strive to be happier. It's an ongoing process. And I think about that in a sense of mental health. It's an ongoing process. Yes. Yeah, you were really struggling last week, but today you're a little bit better. And we have to celebrate those wins. I want to see in schools, I want to see all students take a mental health course every single year, just like they take math, just like they take science.
Reading my mind. I've always wanted that.
We have to do that. It's absolutely important.
So kind of, I have a couple things I want to hit here. So first, like starting off with the emotional leading to more academic success. At least one thing that I've seen the Rockwood School District over like the progression throughout all, I guess, 12 years now. Oh my gosh, over 12 years now. As mental health is more talked about and it's like made more aware, and like teachers are obviously seeing their students struggle more, and then people are talking about it, so they're obviously becoming more aware there. What we're seeing is a combination of both emotional as well as academic into the classroom to make sure that teachers are, not driving students into the ground, but they're also looking out for them, making sure they have a little bit of free time to relax and take care of themselves, but also still getting all the material in, because that's important too. And that's something that I've seen that's very helpful for a lot of students, because at the beginning, a couple years ago when they started off taking a lot of hard classes, and harder than they've been taking obviously through middle school and elementary school, they were stressed out, but teachers recognized that, knowing that this is like their first like serious course load, and they start implementing time in the class for like breaks, checking in on people, and that's something that I saw that was very helpful. And then going on to what he said about like districts being more, or like some people bringing down their ego, like in terms of administration, but at the same time, like I know for us as students, it's sometimes hard for us just to listen to people older than us, because we just feel like we know what's right, and we just kind of want to do whatever we think we should do, which obviously is not the right way of going about things, because the people who are in the administration get paid to do what they do for a reason. They have their titles and they have their education for a reason. So sometimes it's important for us to also, sit back and just listen to what they have to say. And it's obviously important for us to formulate our own opinions and still have that conversation, which is kind of what we've been working on, at least, is trying to make sure the relationship between students and administrators is very strong. We tell each other as much as possible, and we work together kind of as coworkers rather than, an administrator to a student. But yeah, so kind of what he was saying about Happier as well. After he told me about that book, I went and read it, and I realized that, a lot of people that are in my classes, like, obviously he's seen it from an administrative student perspective, but like I've seen people who are struggling a bit and they just feel like they aren't happy. But as he was saying, you're a little bit better that following week than you were the previous week. But a lot of people fail to recognize that, and they're just stuck on reaching one end goal, which is kind of the issue that we've seen in the generation of social media that we have right now, where there's like this perfect world set up and everyone wants to reach that rather than just, making progress. And because that's just the way life goes. You go week by week, and if you're happier that 1 week than you were the week before, that's a win. And taking that mental health course every year, that is also something that's kind of where our work started together, students and administrators, was when another classmate of mine proposed a possible mental health class, and at the time I think it's already in the works at the district, correct? Trying to set up the curriculum for that. So that's something that I think would be very helpful, because right now, at least for students, the real actual mental health material is taught in the health class, which is either taken in ninth grade, freshman year, before students really fully understand what's going on. It's first semester of freshman year, so they don't fully understand what they're going to be experiencing in the next 3.5 years, and then they're going to probably forget everything they learned by the time it gets to junior year, which is a really stressful year. So yeah, so those are kind of the things that I see that are important, as well as the community working together to recognize these issues and are obviously actively working to reach better states.
Well, you describe that two-way street, which is so important, right? You guys as students understanding maybe you don't know everything, right. And then school administration checking the ego at the door. That's the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the connection points that has to occur for any change to happen, on that level, which is so important. That mental health class, that's something that I've always thought about too. And, I had to check myself. I was like, okay, is that just because I'm in this field and I think this is more important? But I go back and I just look at, I went to high school a little bit longer ago than you, and probably you even. Well, I'm sure you too. But, it was, I think, a week that was part of a chapter in health class. Right. And I remember I can remember jokes kids made, that wasn't serious at all. And it was don't even talk about it, really. It's the stigma. And I grew up in a small town. And I think about everything now and how different the stressors are, from athletics to academics, social media world as well too. And then, we talk about gun violence inside of schools. We talk about, how do you help kids understand each other and get to understand the differences in one another. And that class would do so amazing things. Right. So amazing things.
I was reading I don't know if it was a book or a study, but the brain doesn't understand the word not, right? So it doesn't understand that. So, it's like if you say there isn't any violence in this school, the brain doesn't necessarily read that. The brain sees there has to be violence, right? They're talking about it, right? Psychology. Right. And so when you think about what's happening now compared to 30, 40 years ago, every single, you have to do it by state law. You have to have intruder training, intruder drills, right? So we do that in our district. We probably do it monthly, or at least 4 times a year. So you're doing that, you're going through this course. At some point, a kid brain is registering the fact that this is a real possibility. Right. If it wasn't real, we wouldn't be doing this. Right? That's how the brain works. And so now you're sitting with this level of fear of whoa, this can happen in my school. Right. We do little things in school where we kind of push kids out there, but then we don't bring them back to calm them down. There is a wonderful book that I go back to often, and he talks about how when a deer is running from, a lion or something, right, and he escapes, immediately what happens is the deer does something with his body, he shakes and do all these things, he shake it off, but then he probably go rest, right, because he has to calm down the nervous system. And so I think that this mental health class or and I actually would say that we need a mental health class, but we also need a mental health brain break in every single course, every single day. So I don't care if it's 5 minutes or if it's 7 minutes. If we start and we come into the class, hey guys, we're gonna let's sit up with your backs straight. Make sure your chin is away from your chest, your throat is open, and we're gonna put your palms on your knees and we're gonna take a deep inhale. Today we're gonna do our test, our AP test. And I know some of you guys may be a little bit anxious. So let's get that out. Let's close your eyes. Let's visualize what it feels like to ace this test. And then at the end of the class, do the same thing. Every single teacher being able to have some type of mental health mindfulness activities within the classroom. And then if you want to learn more about mental health, you can take a class.
You're opening the door.
Yeah, exactly. Like it cannot be a one-off. You can't have mental health in health class.
Yeah.
But really, I'm struggling AP Calc that. You
exactly.
know, you can't have the absence of mental health on a football field. Some kids don't respond to coaches yelling at them. Right?
Not going to work.
It's not going to work. And so as a coach, good coaches understand the psychology in terms of getting students to be able to do what they want them to do, right? So I think we have to understand all those things. Right. It's time, right? St. Louis is at the forefront of so many issues. The state of Missouri has been at the forefront of so many issues, right? I can think about Supreme Court cases and different things like that. We can be the city, the state, the region that centers mental health and does not fall short of academic gains. Right. So when you close your eyes and you think about the Rockwood School District, most people think about what they would tell you, oh, that's a good school district. And I always ask, what do you mean when you say good? And immediately people go towards the academics. I want you to say, oh, that's a great school district. And the first thing that you say is they center the well-being of kids and they have amazing academics. Their kids go to Vanderbilt, they go to Harvard, they go to Yale, or they go to St. Louis University, or they go to UMSL, but they're happy, they're well, and they can take care of themselves. That's what I want us to think. And I want not only for Rockwood, but I want that to be the case for the entire region. I think we can do it.
Yeah. It's possible.
Yes.
Right?
Because possible. Like one thing one thing that I do on the side is I write opinion editorials for different newspapers around the state of Missouri, and one thing.
Are you just going to drop that in?
No. The reason I say that is because
we'll put that on a graphic.
The reason is because I try and look around like either different news stories around the country for mental health related stuff, and like within districts or just individual students or whole communities coming together to do something. And if I'm being honest, I don't really see much like a huge push like I see within Rockwood. Like obviously we've seen stuff like news coverage and just like stuff like this, like podcasts talking about mental health and like a large scale community work towards bettering the well-being of not only students but people in general in comparison to other cities and other states. So we have something great that's already starting. So, and we've seen and we've experienced firsthand what happens if we don't continue this push. So I think we're in a good spot right now, but we just need to keep pushing towards, a better state of mental health and happiness among the students and everyone else in general.
Yeah, I mean, mental health, and that's the thing, we try to really educate anytime we get in front of people, is mental health touches every aspect of society. You talk about the soft skills, right? And it's like, when I worked in a transitional living program for years, and it's like I could get those kids jobs, right? So this is 18 to 21 year olds, right? I could get them the job, I could get them ready to roll, look good, and know how to answer the questions, but the hard part was helping them keep their job. So when you think about the economy, you think about the money spent in turnover, you think about the healthcare system, the ER, I mean, everything, the criminal justice system, everything is connected to mental health. And it's peeling back the layers to it, and how people respond and the relationships and the connection points that are there.
I remember doing an activity with some middle school kids, this had to be 10, 12 years ago, but I had a group and we met every week. And one week was around mental health. And I brought in some balloons with water, and then we had a sheet of like emotions. And I asked all the kids to write one emotion per balloon. And I kind of randomly picked out a balloon. Had a pan, took a pen, and then put a little bit of hole in the balloon. So obviously the water comes out of the balloon. The question was, what's coming out of the balloon? These were 6th or 7th graders. And they were like, water. And I was like, no. Air. No. I mean, yes, but no, that's not what I'm looking for. And I go on and on. And then one kid said, anger, frustration, love, right? And I was like, yes, that's it. And then the lesson was, the balloon, you are the balloon. What's inside of you is going to come out. So you're right. I can help someone get a job. Keeping a job is the hard part because we didn't deal with the stuff that's inside of them. So when we look at kids and it's like, oh, Aashish get into a fight with someone and we suspend him for 3 days and he comes back to school, he's probably going to get into a fight with someone else because we didn't deal with the core. We can't suspend our way out of this issue. We can't jail our way out of this issue. We can't fire our way out of this issue. We're going to have to sit and be with people. Like, the people matter. Do these individuals matter enough to you that you're willing to sit with them to allow them to receive the support that they need so they can be well? So that saying earlier, how all the children are well, the whole gist is, and they understood that if the children are well, then the community is well. I would say that our saying in St. Louis should be, and how are the people? If the people are well, that means young people, middle-aged people, older people. If the people are well, then we're well. So we have to address it. We have to sit with people and also understand that the anger and the pain and the frustration or whatever that is that these young people and other people have inside of them, they didn't do that to themselves.
Exactly.
So let me help you understand, this is not your fault. Because a lot of times when we do things like, we make young people feel like, oh, you're to blame for, you're in control of your own actions. Yeah, I am in control of my own actions. I just don't have the coping mechanisms to be able to act in the way in which you want me to because this pain is so hard and it's so real. Help me, right? Help me.
That's a great statement because we say that so often, right? You make your own choices. We've said it I've said it many a times, and it's like, until you slow down and you're like, but why is that person making the choices they're making because of those past traumas and those past incidents of whatever it may be, because we all have our own story, and until we open the door to hear those stories, and that goes back to kind of investment in the human being, the human person, right? And I think corporations are starting to figure it out a little bit more because we're starting to get more requests and stuff like that. But even in the corporate world, the business world, it's like, what's the investment in the person? And from a just pure money sense, if I can invest in you and keep you a happy employee, that's better for business, right? But then you're also making a better human being. And that's one of the things we're trying to do at our agency is like, working here, we want you to be a great employee, but I want you to be an even better human being, and when we moved here 7.5 years ago or so, we entered a Rockwood school system, and that was one of the things I loved about the elementary school we went into is about character, and it's like there was such a push on character, and that mattered, and I'm like, that's what it's all about. Absolutely. Because then you'll be a good student, right?
Absolutely.
You'll end up being a good student, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's like one thing you were kind of talking about, like how you're trying to get people into a job, but then once they're in their job, like it's kind of up in the air. It's kind of the same thing for students, as we're trying to get through high school, we're just trying to get the grades, we're trying to pass, we're trying to get out of school, we're trying to graduate. But then after that, what happens? Like the work needs to be done within the school system itself, obviously, because if you can't get a student ready for success by the time they graduate, they might graduate, but how successful or how happy are they going to be when they get out? And that's, I think, one thing that needs to be focused on while you're trying to make people happier in the moment, but also for like progression in the future.
Yeah, so true. So true.
And I was just thinking, like, like we have to do that, and we have to let young people know that there are many paths. Like, that is really important to me. There are many paths to being successful. So if you want to be a psychologist, you can be a psychologist. If you want to be a plumber, you can be a plumber. If you want to be a construction worker or manage and own a McDonald's, then you can do that, right? So you don't have to. And then there needs to be this like deep self-reflection. Like, what do you really want to do? There are a lot of young people who are doing things because their parents want them to do those things, and they feel this push of parents living vicariously through them, and that pressure. So I think that we need to have some parenting conversations to say, if your son doesn't go to Harvard, that's okay too, right? There's a book, Outlier, by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about how the not Nobel Peace Prize, but Nobel, the whole Nobel laureate system. And you would think like most of these individuals come from places like Harvard and Yale and Stanford, and that's just not the case. It's not. Yeah. Right? It's not the case. And so his point is you can be successful and go to, a community college and then eventually go to a university and find a cure for such and such, and then we'll win this Nobel Prize, right? I think that we have to let kids know and young people know that, and parents know that because your child isn't going to college right away or doing this, that's not a failure. When the Obama daughter graduated college or high school, she took a gap year, right? I mean, and you're seeing more and more people do that. Like young people are saying, like, I need a break. I mean, think about that. You go to school for 13 years, only to then continue for another 4. And if you go to medical school, another 8 or 10.
Right, yeah.
So I think that we need to let kids know it's okay. I think there are certain things that, man, this is my issue. This is my stuff. So like I can talk about this all day, and I love it.
I'm liking it.
And so there are things that I think that we do and we've done that we thought was okay, that we need to question ourselves. There's this thing where, at the end of the school year, you do this award ceremony, and we'll say, Aashish went to school all 4 years and didn't miss a day of school, and we're going to give him a perfect attendance award. That was great back in the day. But I'm sure there were days where he was sick. Right. Maybe wasn't feeling his best. Like, you don't have to push through that. Right. When you need to take a rest, when you need to take a break, we need to celebrate the fact that young people are taking a break. We need to celebrate, and I would argue, because I'm really extreme with mental health and wellness for young people, I think all students should get 4 mental health days in a school year, right? So you got 1 mental health day a quarter. And that's whenever you want to take it, you say, hey, I'm taking a mental health day, and it doesn't count against you in any way. I mean, yes, it doesn't reflect that you were there, but you still get to make up your test, you still get to turn in your work, you still do all these things, because that centers mental health. I argue in my school district, and we finally got there, we used to have 10 sick days and then 2 personal days. I argue that we should have 12 personal days, right? Yep. We don't call them personal days. We call them now just 12 sick days. But I'm going to change this. This is going to be one of the things I'm going to fight to change. I don't want to call them sick days, because I think when we think about sick, we think about a runny nose, a doctor's note. Yeah. No, let's just call them, mental wellness days, right? Because there is, as much as students need to have a break, teachers need to have a break.
Oh yeah. Right?
Yeah. There are teachers who have. I have 6 classes, which means, I probably have 100 or something, 20 students on my caseload. Right. And I'm balancing and juggling all of those personalities and trying to make sure all these traumas are in check and supporting all these students and teaching them.
And worrying about like family and all that. So they just got so much,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other side to all this. You got all the students, right? But you also got all those teachers, experiencing everything that the student is. And parents, you brought that up, and we could probably go on forever about that. But there is a difference than nowadays, right, compared to when I was growing up, and the involvement and the pressure that we put on students and kids. Whether it be athletics, where you're playing the same sport for 12 months instead of trying different sports, and even with that, you see professional athletes saying, "Hey, let your kid play different sports. It's okay if they are off in the summer or something like that." But then we as parents are like, "Oh, I gotta keep pushing, And you got athletes saying it's not good, it's not good. But it's like ego, right?
Right.
Checking ego on that as well too.
So one thing you brought up a little bit ago about like success, there were many different paths to it, and I kind of mentioned success before that, but I kind of wanted to take a step back and like redefine success, because success shouldn't be like he was saying, like winning a peace prize, going to like a top college, or being a CEO of a company. But rather we should switch towards like success being measured in terms of how happy you consider yourself. If you can say that you are reaching a state where every week you're feeling better about yourself, Not in terms of job success or all that, but just like you as a person, you in terms of your mental well-being. If you are feeling better every week, or just staying at the same spot, then that should be measured as successful. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what you're accomplishing. Because if you yourself aren't happy, then no matter what success you're seeing in terms of like a job, you're not going to be happy. So that isn't a measure of success. No.
Beautiful. Man, we could keep going, but I probably need to wrap up, right? So this may be a podcast number one of you two, is what I'm sensing. But I mean, there I think there's a couple key points today that we kind of talked about, right? One is success. Define it, and it's okay if it's small successes. It's okay if it fluctuates from day to day. But what are those successes that you can identify in your life? I heard relationships. Discussions, knowing thyself, in that sense of being able to either check yourself at the door or as a student, being able to realize, you know what, maybe I just don't know everything yet. But I mean, to me, it's like you guys are kind of this perfect model right now of student administration working together. And so, Aashish, kudos to you, for giving me hope. In that sense, it's great to kind of listen to what you've done in your career within the school system, and being able to just have courage on a lot of things. So thank you. I mean, for me, it's very exciting to hear this example. And Dr. Terry Harris, thank you and kudos to you for standing up, for continuing to fight the fight, and being there and being that advocate for kids. And I mean, when we think about how we're going to title this podcast, all I keep thinking about is "and how are the children," and then just the concept of St. Louis as well too. So, thank you guys.
Thank you so
much.
much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, this is Tom Duff, round one with these guys. This is Tom Duff with St. Louis Counseling. If you're interested in our services, check us out at stlouiscounseling.org. Until next time, remember, mental health matters.